Welcome to The Exchange on CYC. Today's guest is Sonia Qutami, a mother of three, one of whom has Down syndrome and has a soft spot for children. Her passion for justice and freedom for children who have been exploited to the dark world of child abuse is evident in the work she does with community organisations. When Sonia isn't playing the role of a mother or assisting the community, she's working as a film producer and casting director. Having sold films across the USA, she's currently producing a film based on her faith and exposing the darkness of child trafficking. Sonia, you've been involved in a lot of community work over the past 5 years. What actually inspired you to continue in this path of social justice?
To me, Susie, justice is something that I love. Being a mum myself and being a foster mother, I knew that there's something more that I could actually do. I didn't think that we were able to do anything with justice in terms of trafficking or human exploitation. I have been heavily working alongside an organisation called Destiny Rescue. They rescue children from sexual exploitation and human trafficking. And so when I knew of this organisation, they're a Christian organisation, but irrespective of their faith, when I knew that there was an organisation that I could be actively involved and that there was something that I could do, I definitely did not hesitate. So I got in touch with them, and I've been working alongside them. I don't work for them, but I work alongside them, as well as another organisation called Freedom for Humanity. So I'm a woman that loves children, that loves justice, and wants to fight the dark world as much as I can. So, and leading up to that, I'm actually creating a film on child trafficking and my faith as well. The thing is with child trafficking and human exploitation that a lot of people don't know is that it has become widespread all over the world. And being exposed to abuse and violence as a young teenager, I saw the impact that it had. And so even though that many people cannot be voiced, they have no voice. A lot of victims have no voice. So we, as the outside of the world, we need to be their voices. And so when they escape the child trafficking, may they be the voice of the voiceless as well. So it's just a generational cycle that needs to be broken.
It's such important work, and let's talk about Destiny Rescue for a minute. Tell us about some of the triumphs and challenges that you've experienced while working with Destiny Rescue.
Oh, there's a few. There are a lot of negatives and positives to it. There's a lot of ups and downs, as you can imagine, with anything. A lot of triumphs. There's one particular, and it's the only one that stands out, is rescuing these children from the hands of Satan. And once they actually rescued with Destiny Rescue, because they are a Christian organisation, so what they do is they use God's word, they use the gospel in order to give it to the children in order that they could forgive their perpetrators. And also the gospel is also given to the perpetrators as well, in the hopes that they do repent, turn away from evil, and give their life to God. And when I do these events and I do these talks, I always preach on one verse, and it's John 3:20, where it says, "All evil hates the light because it stays in darkness, so their sin doesn't get exposed." And so, being a Christian and being strong in my faith, it's up to us to expose that as well. But regardless of what faith you are, you don't need to have a faith to have a heart to be able to rescue these children, or even not rescuing physically, but even behind the scenes and doing whatever you can to do that. A downfall with the industry is, unfortunately, it needs money to rescue these children. The fact that it takes money to rescue children is what sickens me to the core, because money is worthless. Money means nothing. It has no value, yet that is valued on a child's life. So when you know that there's children or a child that have been abused or needs to be rescued, the fact that it takes those funds to be able to rescue them is obviously, it's the world we live in. We live in a broken world. We live in a dark world, and it is what it is, unfortunately. So definitely a triumph is when you see these children being freed and they've got their freedom back and they're united with their families. But these families have no idea what's going on with their children. And also the fact that Christ can redeem even the most wicked, and they're given the opportunity to know who God is in order to be able to get that, that forgiveness, that mercy, the grace, because we're all covered by grace. And a lot of perpetrators have been involved in the industry because they too were once abused. So you just don't wake up and say, hey, I'm going to traffic this child today or this community or these group of children, obviously they have also had that happen to them, which therefore that generational curse has not yet been broken. So unfortunately, that's what we're dealing with.
It sounds like people might be in denial about this sort of thing happening, particularly in first world countries. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, absolutely. A lot of people do not believe it's actually happening, but it happens on our own soil. So Satan does not discriminate. Darkness doesn't discriminate. It is everywhere, in every nation. So denial in people is huge. Either they don't want to know about it because they're too scared to actually admit that this is going on. And many people think that they can't do anything. So they think, oh, that doesn't happen. Of course not. It's just what you hear in the movies. But unfortunately, what we see in the movies is played out in real life.
So in Australia, for example, or in the USA, how prevalent is this?
It is massive. And unfortunately, it even goes to the high authorities. So those of high authorities and the high figures that we may look up to, they could be running these industries that we actually see. The thing is, to get through and out of borders, you need clearance. And so who's in front of clearance? The authorities. So it's we just need to be very careful and use wisdom and discernment to who you think you can trust these days. Unfortunately, like I said, Satan does not discriminate. He will devour any child or any soul. He does not care about where you're living. So if he can traffic or if he can hurt or harm you as an individual and take you away from God, because that's his mission, he'll do whatever he takes. So it is massive. The thing is with child trafficking, it is a $500 billion industry worldwide, if not more. It has exceeded the weaponry and the drug industry. And the fact that, the thing is, if you take drugs and you take something to get you on a hit or on a high, you can't take that same drug again because you've consumed it. Just the same with a weaponry. If you shoot it, you can't reshoot it again. But with a child, you can. That child that's been trafficked or sold is actually used 5 to 10 times a day. So they are constantly being used and tortured. So when we put our children to sleep at night, these children are dragged out of bed into another bed to be able to work for the industry. So it is a very dark and evil world out there. And a lot of people don't want to know about it. And it's sad because that could be your child out there one day.
That's absolutely horrific to think you put your child to bed 1 minute and the next minute they've been taken from you. But what happened during COVID? What happened to the industry then?
COVID, the pandemic, was an enormous strain on everyone. The world shut down, which was great for these children because they couldn't be trafficked. So borders have shut. But one thing people don't understand is that the online industry actually soared. It soared by God knows how many percent. So even though that these children were slowed down in the process of trafficking, the online industry revved up. I mean, if you look at the pornography industry, you know, a lot of women that are featuring in these acts, some of them, yes, they are there because of their own personal reasons and pleasures and they enjoy it. There's a large amount of women that are actually on there, even men, that are actually forced to be on there. So every single time people click onto a site to get some sort of pleasure out of that, little did they know that they're actually contributing to this dark world. And so I speak to a lot of people, especially to a lot of men, that you are contributing and you are funding these evil organizations, and they're totally oblivious to that. They didn't look at it in that way. So every single time I speak to someone, whether it's a male or female, they look at the pornography sites in a different light now, which is a good thing. And this is where we need to speak up about. Because if we are all silent, how are these children, or even these young women, going to be rescued? So COVID was a blessing and a curse at the same time. So it was a blessing because everything shut down, the children were stopped. They weren't trafficked from border to border because the criminals actually, they had to change their business model, which it frightened them. They lost a lot of money because their whole business plan has been shut down and they can't commit to their contracts or to this elite or to this organization. So they had to stop, and rather than using these children and waiting for the borders to open, they use these children online. So either way, they were still used.
So you mentioned it was a $500 billion industry. That's phenomenal. That would make it a very large industry in terms of ranking probably number 1 or number 2.
Absolutely. So child trafficking, it is a $500 billion industry, and it has reached 1 or 2, first or the second in the world for profiting. It has exceeded the drug industry as well as the weaponry industry. And those two are massive industries worldwide. So considering that you are selling a child, and I wouldn't say it's for sex, it's actually you're selling a child for rape. So the fact that it has taken over weapons and drugs, which is massive over these last generations, and knowing that these little children are being exploited to that and knowing that they're profiting on that, that alone is sickening.
There was also the moment where you said there can be good and bad things in the industry, and one of the good things, I suppose, is that you have the opportunity to preach Christ. So tell us an opportunity where that happened, where you were able to preach Christ to the perpetrators.
Yeah. Well, with Destiny Rescue, there was this one incident which I tell everyone because this is where God gets glorified. This is God's glory. There was a woman, she was a madame, they'd call her a madame. I believe she was in the Philippines or in Thailand. She ran a brothel and young children were there. I believe she even had her daughter there. And so she got caught. She was sentenced to jail. She served time. And in that time, she was given God's word. So she repented, she turned away from sin, and she gave her life to Christ. So that same property that she used to sell children, she's opened it as a church. And this is where God gets glorified. So when I say that Christ can redeem even the most wicked, this is a beautiful example. So God uses bad for good. And unfortunately, during that time, children were spared and they were suffered. But there's always a purpose for everything for happening. And we may not see, what God sees. He's an all-knowing God. He sees everything. But he's a God of unbroken promises, and he's a just God. And so even if these perpetrators don't receive justice here on earth, they will when God returns. And that gives me comfort.
Now, the organisation is called Destiny Rescue. So I'm assuming you are rescuing children, but do you also have things like a raid? And if you do, what's the difference then between a rescue and a raid?
Yeah, so Destiny Rescue, they do 2 types of rescues. One is a raid, which is on a larger scale where there's multiple children, and it takes massive preparation. The rescuers there are fully armed, so it's quite a dangerous situation. It's not you just go in there, grab the children and go back out, because even the perpetrators are armed as well. So what they would actually do, they'd need to source out and actually sort of spy on these organisations, on the venues, on the locations of where the children are. How many children are there? How many perpetrators are there? What are the times that they shift them to borders? When do they leave? When do they shuffle these children around? So they need to get all of the logistics ready before they can actually execute their plan. As versing a single rescue, a rescue is when you've got a little child that has been forced into a marriage and she's only 6-7 years of age, and this is massive in India. Indians, the India culture, that's their culture, unfortunately, where young children are actually forced to get married to 40, 50-year-old men, and you're looking at between 7 to 12-year-old girls. So you've got a raid, which is multiple, and you've got a rescue, which is just the solo girl, or even boy. So that's the difference. But either way, they are freed, and when they do, the thing is sometimes the family even do this. And this is where we need to be very, very careful. Some of these third world countries, they can't afford it. So they offset their children to that industry to bring in money. And that's where that generational curse doesn't get broken. So in order to cut that, that's where we need to actually give education. So educating these children, educating families that there is more to life than to selling your child for money. And unfortunately, the third world countries don't offer that.
So we've spoken about Destiny Rescue quite a lot. What other work do you do to advocate against social injustice?
Sure. I was at an event and I was approached by someone that has an organisation, and she too is Christian, and it's called Freedom for Humanity. So pretty much the words speaks for itself. She gives freedom to humans. So what they do is they don't rescue children. Destiny Rescue, they rescue these children from sexual exploitation and human trafficking. And then you've got Freedom for Humanity, that they don't rescue the children, so to speak. But when young adults are actually freed from slavery, they introduce them back into the workforce. Why? Because that's a time to rehabilitate them back into society. It gives them healing, to give them work opportunities. So Freedom for Humanity are an organisation that works closely with a lot of organisations to provide sponsorships, internships, in order to give them some work, a chance that we take for granted going to work every single day. And so once they're actually in in particular work or a role, that they too can be able to give back what was handed to them, and that was an opportunity to freedom. When you introduce the God aspect in it, and it's for the purpose of purely for forgiveness, because forgiveness is the best thing that you give yourself. And so once they forgive themselves or the perpetrators, because a lot of these victims feel responsible, they feel guilt and they feel it's their fault. And so you need to unwind, and you need to recondition their mind, the way that they think, the way they speak, the way that they act, because they're so used to that and they've made that normal. It's not normal. So it's up to us, to you and to myself and every single one out there that has a heart, to recondition their minds through education and through love and through grace, and to bring them back into the light.
So these are really important organisations to have in our society. What do you actually do for these organisations?
I hold a lot of fundraising events. I've held a few events in Sydney and in Melbourne as well. We've raised over $100,000, if not more, and I believe there was 50 or 60 children that were rescued. When I first found out about Destiny Rescue and I knew that there was something that I could do, I personally funded a raid in the Philippines, and we rescued 19 young children as young as 5. So as soon as you hear as young as 5, I mean, I have 3 children on my own, and I foster children as young as 5 as well. So I look at them and I think these are God's children, irrespective of where they're from, what faith, what colour, whatever family that they come from, they're all God's children that are being exploited to such demonic forces. And it is a spiritual warfare out there. So it's up to all of us to put our heart into this and to speak up. And it's the awareness. And to me producing a film on child trafficking, it's not to bring awareness to people, because we all know what happens. It's what are we going to do about it that makes a difference.
And it's heartbreaking too when you say as young as 5. And like you said, regardless whether you're a Christian or not, these are children, and the human thing to do is to help these children. So if people do want to help or support the cause of child or human trafficking, how can they help?
There are so many ways, Susie, that people can help. And it's not just financial as well. And I know a lot of people aren't in a position to fund a raid or even a rescue, and that is totally okay. The thing is, you don't need to be a big organisation to do this. Even if you contact Destiny Rescue Direct on their website, there's actually an icon that says, how can we help? And also for Freedom for Humanity as well. They're all over social media. You can definitely get in touch with anyone there, as well as even if you see something that's not right, don't be silent. All it takes is one person to speak up, and you could have saved a soul. I mean, it could be you in a car park out of a shopping centre and you see someone being dragged. I mean, I was in a position where I saw that happening and I didn't know that was the parent, but that didn't seem right. I couldn't go home knowing I saw that. And how do I know that's the parent? Being dragged and being dragged. And so I actually confronted the parent. And because of that, and I would want that the same, because if I saw that on news, that this little boy was dragged away, and knowing that I saw that and I didn't say anything, that guilt would have haunted me for the rest of my life. So speak up. If you see something that doesn't seem right, even if you're wrong, you'd rather be wrong than feel guilt. And so I ask everyone, and I beg everyone, if you see something out there, we don't need your money. We need you to be able to speak up. If you see something, bring awareness to it. Do not be in denial. Shine the light on darkness. And that's what we're all called to do.
Sonia, this has been such an insightful conversation, and I thank you so much for your time. And please reach out to CYC at any time if we can help support these causes as well.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to be able to bring this to scratch. God bless you.
Well, that was part 1 of child and human trafficking. And if you've enjoyed the content in this episode, tune in to the Exchange on CYC for part 2, when we actually speak to a rescuer who is on the ground and in the thick of it. Thank you for tuning in.